Go. Hey everyone, welcome to This Week in Caribbean Tech podcast. My name is Ingrid Riley, founder of SiliconCaribe, and we decided we're going to add more people to the madhouse that is this podcast. But it's a good madhouse because, of course, what we're talking about the top news and issues that is around Caribbean tech and business this week. And we're talking to some of the people that are centered to that. So as usual, we're here with that one, the one in red. He's in his
national colors. My
national colors.
Yeah. I'm Daniel Smith, by the way. But I was like, you know what? Ingrid wears black every week. I need to go back to my uniform. So hey, I'm back in red.
I'm black. This is actually dark blue, sir. It's actually dark blue.
Well, anyway, the way it comes across in the camera, ma'am.
As black. All right, cool. And the other person you're seeing up there waiting patiently is none other than Mr. Selwyn Cambridge. He is
Thanks
the
for having me, guys.
Of course, welcome. This is the
Welcome.
man, the CEO of 10 Habitat, based in Bridgetown, Barbados. We're going to be talking to him because what we've begun this week is we're going to be doing a little bit of island hopping. We are going to be visiting some leaders in the tech and entrepreneurial startup ecosystem across the region and the diaspora. And so we decided to start with Barbados. Why? Because Barbados is hot and we love, we call her Auntie Mia, but we really call her the Caribbean Prime Minister, Mia Mottley. A lot of things have been popping in Barbados. Barbados, without question, is one of the top 5 Caribbean nations that are doing some really, really fundamentally significant things for Caribbean tech startups, for entrepreneurs, Caribbean entrepreneurs, for sure. So, Selwyn, welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, guys. And I'm looking forward to having an exciting conversation with you guys on this topic.
But of course, let's start here. The last time you and I actually, faced off online in camera was when, I think it was 2020 or was it 2021? I do not remember, when I decided I'm going to have Digital Caribbean and online. It's all about take the temperature, bring everybody together in an online space and see what's happening. This is what is going on at the 30,000 square foot level. We have, this pandemic going, but at the same time, it doesn't look as if we're going to die. So since this is going to change a lot of things because we're all online, crisis usually creates beautiful things. And so we're taking a temperature back then. What has been happening with you personally since the last time we faced off on camera?
Oh, well, it's been quite a while, and it probably was in the cusp of the pandemic when we spoke. That's true.
Yeah.
Well, what happened since then? When the pandemic hit, we had physically shut our doors at 10 Habitat and went 100% virtual.
Right.
And quite frankly, that became a blessing in disguise because it immediately expanded our reach and allowed us to really support a lot more founders across the region. But through that, in the middle of that pandemic, we purchased a building. So before we were like 4,000 square feet, and then we purchased an old printery and refurbished it into an innovation hub and co-working space. And now we're in a 20,000 square foot facility, trying to do some interesting work with entrepreneurs and tackle a number of different verticals. So it's been a lot happening, a lot has been on my plate, and I am literally, juggling between the crossroads of sane and insane.
I know that space.
We live there every day of the week.
Of course.
Right. So you guys can relate.
Absolutely. Now, before we get any further about 10 Habitat and its work in Barbados and across the region, tell us exactly what is 10 Habitat and why did you start it?
Yeah. Interestingly, 10 Habitat was really the result of a personal experience that I had as an entrepreneur starting my own business and recognizing that a lot of the organizations that were set up to support founders were not at all purpose-built. They were not given the type of support that founders were in need of. And I, as a founder, was pretty frustrated at what type of support I was receiving, the kind of advice and the kind of guidance that I was getting. And so I ventured out on my own and made a lot of mistakes, but also learned quite a lot. And throughout that process, I decided to start a network that was just called 10. And 10 really stands for an acronym, which means the Entrepreneurial Network. And it really was a network for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs, primarily supporting the journey of entrepreneurs. And when I actually got into that, I recognized, holy crap, what we are in for is a huge undertaking. And so we started to realize how big a problem it was, the type of challenges that entrepreneurs were facing and what we would need to have to address it. And so we completely revamped it. We started this in 2009 and revamped it in 2015 to become 10 Habitat, which is essentially a habitat that we modeled off of a habitat you actually find in nature, to really nurture the growth of entrepreneurs in a very holistic way. And so that's really the origin story of 10 Habitat. It was really out of a personal need because I recognized the challenge that other founders were experiencing and decided that if I can help avoid some of the challenges and missteps that I made as a founder by providing the kind of support that others needed, that I'll do it. And so we set it up, and that's one of the reasons we set it up as a nonprofit. So we focus on really providing the kind of support that that entrepreneurs need in a way that they need it.
Yeah. How long has it been around?
So we started in 2009.
Oh, okay. So that you're 13 years old.
Yeah, so we've had some time at this.
Yeah.
We've had some time at this.
That for sure. You're going to say something, Daniel?
Yeah, I'm listening to Selwyn's story, and you know what struck me is how much this is based upon his personalized need. And I would say that, you know, for a lot of us, even in our entrepreneurial experiences, that's where we are. It's, you know, our personal needs drives us. So congratulations on that, because I think that, you know, it's one of the things I know Ingrid and I, we muse about in our own in terms of what the ecosystem looks like in terms of resources for entrepreneurs. And so as you started talking, you know, my follow-up question to that is, you know, what success have you seen thus far? Because you revamped from 2009 to 2015, so that was one span of 2015 to 2022. You know, what success have you seen? But you know, what do entrepreneurs tell you that they need most in terms of what you're seeing so far?
Yeah, so you're touching on some of my favorite topics to talk about. Well, the first response to your question in terms of what we've seen, the biggest change that we've seen is actually mindset. And that was a needed change. And so that's certainly very encouraging and very moving in the right direction. I believe positive improvements that will change the face of entrepreneurship in the region and change the ecosystem just by that subtle change in mindset. In terms of what entrepreneurs...
Before you go further to answer the rest of that, when you talk about the change of mindset, because mindset is everything, it determines everything. What was there and what is there now?
Yeah. So essentially, and this is not isolated to Barbados. We've seen, because we do work across the region, and we've seen this happen in just about every territory we've worked in, is that the mindset of entrepreneurs is actually not entrepreneurship, but it's self-employment. And what you recognize is that persons were actually pursuing entrepreneurship as a default position to replace a job they lost. And so they were not necessarily building scalable businesses. So they were going into those businesses with a mindset of creating something to support themselves.
Right.
So, and you started to see the local ecosystems reflect that, because a lot of these businesses were starting small and remaining small, right? And so what the result was that a lot of the institutions that were popping up were supporting that mindset and were supporting that construct. So that when you had an entrepreneur that comes up with some business, some tech-enabled business that's looking to embrace blockchain to change efficiencies in workplace management, the institutions were like, huh?
Yeah, what is that?
What is that? And how can I support that, right? And then when you look at the environmental risk capital, the prospective investors can't evaluate the risk because they don't even understand the construct or the concept of that type of business.
Yeah.
So that's and what we started to see was persons starting to make a deliberate attempt into getting into entrepreneurship based on opportunities. So we started to see more opportunity-based type entrepreneurs where they're going after solving a problem and providing a solution that's scalable, as opposed to needs-based entrepreneurship where they're just simply trying to provide a living for themselves. So that's the mindset change that we saw. And then persons started to become a lot more comfortable with the associated risk and the prospect of failure. Right, because we have this thing in the region where, you know, if you fail, it's the worst thing that can happen. You get labeled, you know, and we're seeing changes around how persons approach that, and that for me is the most encouraging thing, because a lot of the work that we did in the earlier stages of 10 Habitat, I said, and we still do it to some degree, but more holistically. Said we were 90% counselor and 20% business developers, you know, because you really had to work on the mindset of the founder to really get them to appreciate what the journey was going to be like, how they needed to approach it, and how they needed to embrace the uncertainty and risk associated with that journey. So that for me, it's a huge step in the right direction, that mindset shift.
Absolutely. And I think what else you said there, Daniel, you were asking about successes or
and also so it was the successes, but also, you know, what did this entrepreneur tell him that they want? Because I think that is one of those critical aspects, because just even his explanation just now about mindset, I think what it said to me is, you know, ultimately, Ingrid, you know, my story of starting in the Caribbean, you know, near 20 years ago, and just going through that whole experience, you know, what they don't tell you and what you figure out later down, you know, kind of what spurred Selwyn to start this is ultimately that this is going to be rough. And, you know, the fact is that we look down on people whose businesses fail or whatever reason. But why I'm glad about what Selwyn is doing is that, you know, even through failure, at least you have an ecosystem that supports you. And I think that is one of the most disparaging parts of entrepreneurship because if you fail, it's like everybody knows it's you know, it could be a big headline, everybody, you know, kind of looks down on you, but at least within an ecosystem, at least you can get jobs, at least you can take, you know, and I don't know what, so you can go to that, but you know, at least there is a support mechanism. And I think that what I realize in entrepreneurship, even with what we're building now, is that the ecosystem is the most important thing that they don't necessarily tell you, but entrepreneurship by itself is lonely. And it could be very frustrating, especially those down periods. And so having that ecosystem, I think it's part of that framework that we need to do better as the region in terms of building, whether or not it's in Barbados or Jamaica or Trinidad or, you know, just the region. So, you know, that is what happened.
I couldn't agree with you more, Daniel. And I would say, it's also one of the cornerstones to what we do, and what we've built on is really building community around entrepreneurs, right? That is critically important.
Absolutely.
Because as you rightfully alluded to, entrepreneurship can be very lonely, but it does not have to be. Right. And that's the thing that we have to understand and keep predicating on. It does not have to be. And that in itself is also a mindset change that needs to occur, right? Which is, this whole notion of trust and collaboration. We got some big trust issues going on here in the region, and within the ecosystem that we have to work on breaking down. But to answer the question in terms of what we heard entrepreneurs constantly saying is that you ask any entrepreneur, and they would immediately tell you that their biggest challenge or issue is access to finance. Right, they'll always tell you that, and we constantly hear this over and over, and in the past we heard it quite a lot. But we had to do quite a lot of work on addressing that, because what we've recognized is that actually is not the issue. Most entrepreneurs' challenges is not finance. I think the biggest issue that we've recognized for entrepreneurs is that it's an inability to execute on great ideas and the poor access to effective networks. Those are the two critical things that entrepreneurs suffer from, because what happens and what we've seen in our time doing this is that entrepreneurs are like idea factories, right? They're constantly coming up with the next best idea they think, but the challenge is that they don't always possess the requisite skill sets to execute on that idea. And because they don't have access to the effective networks to draw on to bring in that expertise and bridge that capacity deficit, they move forward and try to execute on it themselves. And they fail miserably at effective execution. And so that's really a vicious cycle that continues for entrepreneurs. And until they start to connect themselves to these networks that can help them to effectively execute on these great ideas, money will not follow poorly executed ideas. Money follows well-executed ideas every single time, every time of the day. And so once you get that fixed, money no longer is the issue. So money never was the issue.
I agree. I mean, first, glad for you to tell us exactly why you started it and when you started it and what entrepreneurs are telling you, and that, your major success so far on one level is that mindset change. But I want to discuss that whole thing. You're talking about is not money, because you're right. There's a lot of money out there, all kinds of money, right? But it links to that whole, why is it that we don't go about, one, creating those relationships that opens up the doors to these networks, locally, regionally, internationally. And you said two words again, trust and collaboration. Tell me, in your mind, how do you think those two things are correlated?
Well, quite honestly, they're inseparable. I mean, you cannot, and what we've seen is that you cannot have effective collaboration without common trust. Right. And it's this vicious cycle that we've also seen, right? Is that most entrepreneurs are apprehensive to trust each other because either they've got some sad story about being ripped off in the past, or being done over by someone. And so what we have had to do is, and this is where I think the ecosystem needs to do a better job at. The organizations that are out there that are purporting to support entrepreneurs have to first start to support each other, right? And we have to start to understand that in order for us to build an environment where trust is the center of it, we have to start trusting other organizations to collaborate and cultivate an environment where entrepreneurs feel as though they're part of something big and they're part of something that's nurturing. But then you got these organizations that, and I make no apologies about this, because this is something I'm real passionate about, and it peeves me because I see it repeated time and time again, where you've got national and sometimes regional organizations that are supporting entrepreneurs, but would try to do it on their own as opposed to collaborating with others who are doing complementary things in order to move the needle forward.
Yeah,
and we're
absolutely.
all trying to achieve the same damn thing, but we're just, I don't know if it's this notion that we all have to have a feather in our cap to say we did that, but it's futile and it continues to undermine the progress of the ecosystem.
Yeah.
And it just creates a stalemate that feeds down to the entrepreneur.
So I have this theory, right? Because of course, what you're talking about maps here in Jamaica, when what we've been doing with SiliconCaribe and our community, Kingston Beta, and like you, we've reached out across the region and the diaspora as well. And that trust thing is really, really huge. And yes, there are stories, real stories. It's not just a figment of entrepreneurs' imagination.
True.
Of people being bought out for $1 because they didn't read the contract. They're being, they're sold, down the line by an investor. They had a partner that took something and ran. Those things are just a natural part of doing business in the world, wherever you are. But what is it? How do we solve this trust problem, right? Is it a case of, do we need more transparency? Do we need more bad actors, spotlighted and put on blast? Everybody knows who they are. Do we need to, and so we share that information. What do you think we need to really kind of, amp up the trust? Because it is needed to build relationships. It is needed to access capital and access talent.
Yeah. Look, this is how I see it. I don't necessarily think that this issue of trust is going to be solved by the organizations. They're going to be solved by the entrepreneurs. And it's going to be a grassroots evolution that is going to help change the environment, where entrepreneurs are going to start to recognize that in order for me to get forward, I'm going to have to trust the other person next to me, or I'm going to have to collaborate. And enforced collaboration will undoubtedly create a scenario where you have no other option but to trust the person. And then when you become comfortable by recognizing the progress you've made in collaborating, then the trust becomes sort of organic, right? It's unfortunate, but I do not think that we're going to be able to orchestrate trust. We're going to have to be able to facilitate it by creating the opportunities for entrepreneurs to collaborate more. One of the things that I've always seen, right, is that a lot of work that's being done by international development agencies, some regional development agencies, and they do these international trade shows, right? And they bring entrepreneurs from all over the region to, let's say, explore market opportunities in Europe or in Asia and in Africa. And when these entrepreneurs from the region meet up and go to these far-flung destinations, there's more value derived from them talking to their neighbors next door. So the Trini talking to the Lucian talking to the Bajan talking to the Guyanese and the Surinamese. And they're amazed by what's happening in their backyard that they had no idea is going on.
Absolutely.
And this is what we've got to facilitate more of. We've got to facilitate these cross-border collaborations right within the region. And that is what is going to fuel the type of trust that we're talking about, where it becomes organic. And then for me, what I think will happen is that the organizations will have no other choice but to follow suit.
Yeah. You know, you talk about that, and I completely agree, and I get that. But to me, that's almost like a macro level. But you're right. You said something about that is going to come from the entrepreneur, not from the organizations. And what I've had to tell myself in the past, and other entrepreneurs that I've either mentored or collaborated with, is that there's also a part where, as an individual, you have to trust your own gut, trust your own knowing, trust your own instincts in terms of who you deal with. Trust, do your own research, whether by asking others, like, who is this person, or what have they done? It's called Google. Google is a beautiful thing. It's free. Do your own research as well. And just because they say that the only way that a business is going to improve is because the entrepreneur is also growing, right? And so as an entrepreneur, you have to take on that responsibility of growing and knowing as well. So for me, I think the trust comes from they don't know. And so they have to take the responsibility to know and also realize that, competition is always going to be there. You can be, competitive and collaborative at the same time. And so I think you're right. The more entrepreneurs share stories with each other, whether we're in their own country or around the region, or around the world, then they realize, God, one, they're not alone. Two, this is part of and parcel of being a successful entrepreneur, and they get to decide, do I really kind of want to continue to do this? You have any other questions? Because I have some more for Selwyn.
So yeah, I mean, I hear what you guys are saying, but this is what I needed to throw into the mix, because while I believe that some of it is really dependent upon entrepreneurs, I do believe that we as a region need to start looking at how our legal frameworks operate to protect entrepreneurs and ideas and NDAs and enforcement. And because I understand, how entrepreneurs feel, because trust me, I've talked to major funders in the Caribbean who next thing they steal your idea. And for me, it happened personally. And there's nothing, because I was Daniel Smith. I'm kind of a nobody compared to some of these people. So the question really is, trust is one of those things that we have to, engender and but people have been, like Ingrid said, been burnt. And so we need, I would say, some type of legal framework, because NDAs aren't enforced in the Caribbean. Nobody, you're write an NDA or sign an NDA and it's like as good as the paper it's written on, basically. So the question really is how do we, I think that we need, whether it's CSME or, Caribbean Court or some kind of framework though, to be able to, because trusting in the system has to be part and parcel of entrepreneurship. For me, even building a business now, I realize one of those things is compliance. So my business is incorporated, taxes filed, XYZ. All of those things help build out an ecosystem and a framework. And so in the region, how do we push to make sure that we actually have some kind of framework? Because I think that people would be gun shy and would be very scared to be able to go through unless they experience some of it. But if their initial experience they've been burnt, then how do we make sure that we create that kind of safe space for them?
Legally.
So Daniel, I hear you, and to some degree I agree with you, and I have to partially disagree. And the part that I disagree with is that so regardless of where you go, there's always going to be this issue or the risk of doing business. There's always going to be that risk. What I think has to happen is, and this is why I talk about building community around entrepreneurs, right? And making sure they have access to these effective networks. Because one of the things that you're going to have to be able to do as an entrepreneur starting any business is yes, you're going to have to trust, but I say trust, but verify. Right, so you don't go blindly into something, and this goes back to what I was saying earlier. A lot of entrepreneurs attempt to venture out into their business development on their own. An entrepreneur should not be doing that, because the whole cycle of business does not favor the entrepreneur that ventures out on their own. There's a lot more things that can go wrong when you choose to do that. So one of the things that you want to be able to do is, okay, if you've got a really great idea, then you need to be able to have access to some legal counsel and support to be able to help you understand, how do I protect my idea? How do I share what I need to share safely in order that for someone to not rip me off? And then the second thing is, okay, from a management perspective, right? How do I create the type of management structure and frameworks that protects me as the founder and my ideas, so that once I'm going through the development process of my business, I'm protected at every step of the way? And because entrepreneurs don't plug into those structures, they attempt to do it on their own, there's this long tail of stories. Now, let me just say that being able to plug into those structures does not negate the possibility or probability of you getting ripped off.
Right.
That's just the natural course or risk associated with business.
Correct.
But I think you have a better chance of being able to move forward safely by having the ability to plug into those networks. That's crucial.
Yeah, and I 100% agree with what you say. I think that we kind of saying the same thing a bit, because I do believe that legal structures are important. But the thing about it is that that's why people like you are so important, because legal structures and documents are important. IP rights. Who owns the IP right to the company? You, your employees, XYZ. But I don't think that is taught enough. So you have a lot of people, hey, I want to be an entrepreneur, but they don't understand. And I think that, the systems that you set up, but also, just making some of these things plug and play, especially for IT companies and those who in software development who may not necessarily, because I think that some of that is compliance, but those compliance issues fall within the legal framework. And I think that, that is, and it gives you protection. So I do think we're saying the same thing basically, but I think that ultimately what I have seen sometimes in the region is that we don't give people enough of those structures to be able to say, okay, here's what, I trust the system implicitly, because they don't know and they come into it blindly, expecting that, hey, here's what, I know Ingrid and she's the best actor, and so if I connected her, we'll have all this. But they don't know, okay, I should have a documented Ingrid saying X, Y, Z. So I think that ultimately, it does, and people like you need to be on programs like this, like what we're doing, to really spread the knowledge far and wide, because there is and that's why I think that the education gap is part of the issue. But I think funding is one of those issues too, but we'll get to that at a different time.
I kind of want to, I get that. And I kind of want to drill to a little bit to your community. How big is your community right now in terms of the people that you serve at 10 Habitat?
So we've got a community of just over 2,000 entrepreneurs that we provide support to, spread across the region. And that continues to change, because we're always running new programs, so we're always inducting new founders into the community.
Beautiful. I went to your website and I was curious about three things. One, this 14-day accelerator program. Give us a little bit snippet about what's that and why you chose to do a 14-day accelerator program. Pretty much it's almost like a work sprint, if you want to put it that. But tell us why you chose 14 days an accelerator program.
Interesting. When I designed, because I personally designed that program, and even some of my team, when I was designing it, said, "Selwyn, are you sure? This seems crazy." But the truth is, look, we've been doing this for some time, and this is a comment that I constantly make, right? In most of the developed ecosystems across the globe, a founder would move from idea to market to revenue in 3 to 6 months.
Yeah.
In the region, it takes us 3 to 6 years. And it's absolutely ridiculous because it's not that they are smarter than us.
Correct.
It is simply comes down to mindset and access.
Yes.
Those two things.
Yes.
That's all it is, mindset and access. And so when I designed the 14-day accelerator, it was specifically to prove to founders that they can actually be in the market in 14 days. And so the 14-day accelerator is essentially designed to take either businesses at the idea stage or existing businesses and move them from point A to point B, whether it is growing their sales or having their first customer, first revenue within 14 days. And that's essentially what it's designed to do.
Wonderful, wonderful. And the other one was Spark Lab. What is that about?
So the Spark Lab speaks to the core of what 10 Habitat represents. And that is, we believe that not everyone would be an entrepreneur, but everyone could benefit from entrepreneurial thinking. And so the idea behind the Spark Lab is to use entrepreneurial thinking and principles to help drive innovation within public and private sector. So it's our way of interfacing with organizations, whether it's in the public sector or private sector, to help them solve challenges, major systemic challenges, using entrepreneurial principles and thinking to develop solutions to apply to those challenges. So it's an innovation lab that takes problems, converts them into a process, and breaks it down to develop solutions using an entrepreneurial process to do so.
It's almost like a venture studio, really.
Yes, almost. And then
like
we bring together founders to help work on those solutions, creating opportunities for them to have first customers or sell their solutions to public or private sector.
Beautiful. And of course, one that of course would have caught my interest was 10 Sisterhood, the focus on women. When did this come about and how is that going? Because I'm very interested.
Post-pandemic. That came about post-pandemic. So it's relatively new. But it's something that we were doing for a long time. We've always run female founders boot camps, startup boot camps, to specifically cater to the nuances of female entrepreneurship and women-led ventures. But what we've also recognized over the years of what we're doing is that about 68% of our respondents are female.
Not surprised there.
Programs we do, right? And
Not
so
surprised there.
if we have such a large percentage of our founders being female, and the experience of women entrepreneurs is entirely different from male entrepreneurs.
Thank you, Selwyn.
And
yes,
you're welcome. And the challenge there is that a lot of programming that's being designed is not being designed with this nuance in mind. Right. And so
here we go.
So that's why we created the Sisterhood, specifically to cater to the nuances that female founders face. Absolutely.
We're definitely going to talk because we're doing some things here in Jamaica as well. And that's definitely going to touch the region and the diaspora. So I'm happy that is that, because I recognized just my own self, just doing Kingston Beta for 15 years and SiliconCaribe for 15 years. People, just the events, there are a lot of women in the audience, but they were not pitching much. I had to beat the bushes, smoke them out to get them to come and pitch or to come to be part of the community. Thankfully, that has changed in 15 years. We can see that the tide has changed because, again, more women have started to come out to talk their stories, to share what they're doing. And also I've had to, had a bunch of very contentious conversations to recognize that there are nuances to women entrepreneurship. Do you know what they are? Have you crafted your program, your product, your service, how your approach to that? And if not, then you're doing them a disservice. You're doing half of the Caribbean population a disservice. You are hiding yourself away from a bunch of amazing innovations and companies that are women-led or women-focused. And so we're definitely going to talk about that, because there's a lot of things brewing in the region. But I want to talk money. You want to talk money, Daniel? I'll talk some money.
Well, that's where he said that money is not a problem. I'm trying to figure out, okay, where the money is, because clearly someone has access to the money, Ingrid, that we don't know. So I want to know where the money is. I want to know who are the entrepreneurs getting funded, and what kind of dollar amounts we're talking about, because I think that is critically important. Because even on LinkedIn, I shared an article today where somebody was saying, ultimately, and it goes back to the conversation, especially for Black entrepreneurs in the US, it's you're over mentored and underfunded. And so there's everybody who has an accelerator, and everybody who has a this, and you have to pay for this or that. But ultimately, they're not connected to anybody who is writing checks. And some of these accelerator programs don't come with money unless you're YC, Techstars, Generator. So my thing about it is, you say that the money is there, so I'm like, okay, so show us the money.
And when we talk about the money, is the money for entrepreneurs. I mean, you've clearly you've put together a community, Selwyn. You have crafted programs based on the needs that you have detected within that community. And you've been doing this for 13 years. So there has to be, interesting stories about investments. But I'm gonna ask you a follow-up question about success stories. But yes, how you've been catering to what you said, 2,000 Caribbean entrepreneurs across the region? Are they, having gone through your programs and having been part of your community, are they getting the funding that they need?
Not at the rate that I would like to see them get it. But let me just qualify the statement that I made earlier. When I talk about entrepreneurs making the comment that their access to finance is their challenge, and when I say that that's not really what it is that entrepreneurs have been trying to get bad executed ideas funded. And that has been the challenge, right? So because they're not getting funded, they'll always say that that's the issue, but that's not really the issue. The issue is execution on networks, right? But having said that, yes, the argument can be made that the ecosystem to some degree is undercapitalized. There is a huge challenge when it comes to the ready availability of risk capital in the region, right? There's money available, but there's not a lot of risk capital that's available. And more importantly, patient capital, because entrepreneurs require patient capital and smart money. There's a lot of dumb money circulating, but not a lot of smart money. And what I mean by that is that there are a lot of people or entities that are willing to offer loans to entrepreneurs without any kind of support, mentorship, or access to networks. That's dumb money. What you want is smart money, where with that funding comes mentorship, it comes access to networks, comes introduction to new customers, to new clients. That's what you want money to bring with it. What we've been able to see is that there are entrepreneurs who have done the work, put in the work of building well-executed ideas with a value proposition that effectively encourages the interests of investors and they're getting funded. They're not getting funded to the ticket sizes that I think that they should, but I believe that that is going to be a process, which is also why we have made a decision to venture into that space. So we're currently working on setting up an early seed venture fund.
Beautiful.
Right? Because we see that, yes, and this is my first public announcement on your show.
Exclusive.
An exclusive, yes. So a $25 million early seed venture fund.
This is 25 million
US.
Asian dollars or US? Okay.
US. To focus on writing smaller ticket sizes to move businesses from the early seed stage to a pre-seed, to then move them onto.
What ticket sizes are you calling me?
So
like
we're looking at a 50 to 75,000 ticket size, because we believe that in that pre-seed, that early stage is where founders need the support to be able to get the level of traction that is necessary to be able to prove the viability of the business, and then they can start to have those meaningful discussions with follow-on investors that will then fund the bigger ticket sizes. And so that's the work that we're currently doing right now to be able to launch that.
Fantastic. And this goes to my next question, Selwyn. You've been in this game for 13 years. So, and you know, we're seeing the mindset change, you know, and that's been successful. Your entrepreneurs are getting better at, you know, crafting well-executed, you know, startups, and, you know, getting better at, you know, accessing networks and asking for help and that kind of a thing. But you mentioned something. Do you see that it's maybe like around that time now? The reason why I ask, where people like yourself, people like myself, others who have been in the game for 13, 15, 10 years, who've been helping entrepreneurs along this process, and make that natural step of creating a venture fund and everything. Because I did tell you off air that that's the direction I'm in now, you know. So it's is this like a saying to us that it took this long, and it takes this long to develop an entrepreneurial ecosystem that will yield entrepreneurs that are having gone through a process that are now ready to accept this kind of a pre-seed, early seed round, and then ready them for the next level. Just kind of your own thoughts around where we are right now, where Barbados is right now in terms of the development of the overall ecosystem.
Yeah, and the short answer to that is yes, it does take time. It does, and look, everyone mentions, you know, Silicon Valley. Listen, that is a 30, 40-year project.
Correct.
Right? And so once you appreciate that the time to get to that stage is going to be a long haul, you'll be okay. We are now getting there, but I do believe that by getting to this stage, we've started to build the momentum that will move us further faster, right? Because now we've built the framework, we are now picked up momentum, and then you know the natural process of momentum will take place, and physics will have its way, and we'll start to move a lot faster. And that's why I'm encouraged by and buoyed by, because once you see, the thing is, all we need to be able to do, the work that you're doing, you know, Ingrid and Daniel, the work that we're doing here and others, all we need to be able to do is to point to a few success stories and watch what's gonna happen.
Absolutely. We're doing that here in Jamaica. We're doing that here in Jamaica. We have two actually of our startups that were part of the Kingston Beta community that went IPO. The entrepreneurs were part of the community. One got, you know, some private equity funding. She's now moved, and she's right now, as we speak, opening up another branch of her business in Trinidad. And and so we stand up point to these things. They're like, wow, interesting. That's one route to getting there. But like you, I believe that while Jamaica has maybe like 2 years upon you, right, because of the SiliconCaribe scenario, we're just about getting there now, where you're right, where the mindset has started to shift. People understand the role of relationships and networks and approaching it differently. They're using Google and asking for help a lot more. Something as simple as that, right? They're also all those trips that we arrange for startups to go abroad, and they're more exposed as well as trips to the other Caribbean islands, trips to other ecosystems. They're like, oh my God, yeah, this can happen. So I always go back to this book that I got, I think in year 7 of doing Kingston Beta and a whole other bunch of other events that we're doing to help the programs that we're involved in to help entrepreneurs. This book by Bradfeld, it's called How to Basically Develop a Entrepreneurial Ecosystem in Your City. And it was given to me by a white American investor who called me and saw all the stuff that I was doing. I was like, Ingrid, do you know what you're doing? I was like, yeah, I'm having fun, blah, blah, blah. But I'm like, right, a little bit burnt out right now. Let me tell you why you need to slow down. And he sent the book to my doorstep. And I took it a weekend and read it. And I was like, oh, I need to slow the fuck down. This is really way long, going to take way longer. And am I committed to it? So in the book, it says it takes between 15 and 25 years for any city, any nation to basically be pumping out a consistent flow of successful tech businesses. And when I tell people that, they're like, oh, no, we can't. No, that's
but
too long.
and two things. Number one, I was at a dinner last week with a bunch of founders. And we were talking about the Miami ecosystem and what it is. And Miami is crypto, Web3, and stuff like that.
Right.
And, we started around the room trying to figure out what were the issues in the Miami ecosystem for entrepreneurs, especially around capital, etc. If you're not in Web3, you have some difficulty. And my reason for saying that, Ingrid, is because ultimately, you and I kind of disagree on this sometimes, but my thing is that everybody needs to pick their lane in terms of how we get to the next stage. Because you're raising, trying to get your fund. Selwyn is doing his stuff. Whoever else in the region, we know Martinique is doing their stuff. Trinidad doing something, whatever the other. But the thing about it is that what I see, and I said to somebody even, totally off topic recently, is like, when you look at the Caribbean, we have a bunch of bright people. We're brilliant. Absolutely. Brilliant. But our problems, in terms of even in understanding entrepreneurship, really stems from the fact that we work in silos. And that doesn't help us because, as Selwyn was alluding to, everybody wants to be a tin man. Hey, we do it in Jamaica, we do it in Trinidad, we do it in Barbados, we do it in Martinique. But that doesn't help us. And so as an ecosystem, isn't it way more productive if we figure out, okay, what is my lane? Because here's what, Ingrid, some people who do in food tech. All the people in food tech, hey, Ingrid is your point person. Even if it's about just conversating with Ingrid once a week or something like that. But we need to get smarter because when you realize some of the issues in Miami is that, okay, well, there are like 5 to 7 schools around Florida, in South Florida, etc. But the region is like, okay, you have UE, you have this, you have that. How much schools do we have? How much CS graduates are we training out? Where do we look for talent? Because talent is going to be one of those big things that we need to start looking for, especially as we grow this ecosystem. How much really can we serve the markets that we are in? Do some of us need to go outside? What diaspora contacts and relationships? So there's a bunch of questions that we need to start asking to make the ecosystem perform, because I think that we can leapfrog or reduce some of those stages. But the fact is that we have to think about it in a holistic manner. 30,000 feet, as you like to say, Ingrid, but we have to start doing it.
Am I understanding you that you're pointing to one of the questions I was going to ask you, which is this? My thesis around Digital Caribbean is this, that each Caribbean nation should figure out what it does best or what it wants to be the best at in the region and the world, right? That's the lane that Daniel is speaking about. Pick a lane, right? Marry that with technology and then go all in on it. And this could lead into our news section easily, but let me do this first. Barbados right now, 10 Habitat is smack in the middle of Bridgetown, Barbados. You have 20,000 square feet of space. Anyway, I'm coming to look at it, yeah? I'm coming to work in it.
You're welcome.
Thank you. But Barbados is clearly, through its leadership at the political level with Prime Minister Mia Mottley, through entrepreneurs like Lily Dash and of course Gabriela Bed from BIT, Barbados is clearly positioned itself to be a fintech hub in the region. Do we agree? One, with that. And two, is 10 Habitat aligned with such the lane theory?
So short answer is yes, I've been a strong proponent of being able to have, for want of a better term, specialist islands, where we identify those specific areas of strong points that we can develop the islands. But that is it's almost utopian, right? I'm not sure we get there, because maybe from a political level, I'm not sure we get there. From a grassroots organizational private sector level, is probably more possible and likely for us to achieve it. My response to where 10 Habitat is positioning itself, look, I've constantly maintained this position, and yes, Barbados is strongly looking at and pursuing fintech and creating a lot of legislative frameworks to help facilitate that, which is good. And we've seen a few ventures and a few more that are coming up that are working in that space. In fact, the government has created a sandbox to help facilitate the regulatory adjustments to support fintech companies and solutions. However, one of the things that I strongly maintain is this. I believe as a region, we've always been really slow to adopt technology at the rate the rest of the more mature ecosystems have. And that has been a challenge for us in many ways and for many industries in many ways. But what we're incredibly good at is that we just naturally got a knack to create. We're just innovative like that.
Yep.
We just really off the chain when it comes to innovation, which means that I believe we don't know where the next amazing innovation is going to come from.
Yeah. Okay.
Which industry, which sector is going to come from. I think technology is going to help to accelerate that.
I agree.
But it may not start in fintech, it may not start in agritech, it may not start in medtech. We don't know, but we do know that some really fantastic, innovative idea is going to come from someone in the region, in someone of the territories, and it's going to knock us out to the park.
I agree.
And we have to be in a position to be able to have the frameworks to support that kind of innovation that can come from anywhere. And so the play for us, the long play is, one, we need to be industry and sector agnostic and building a framework to facilitate innovation wherever it comes from. And then helping to connect that innovation with technology to accelerate its growth and adoption. That's how we've positioned ourselves. So yes, if it happens to be fintech, then we're there. If it happens to be a process that is developed to deliver, medicine to at-risk communities, then we're there, because for us, it's about building the framework. How do we support that bright idea? And then we can connect it to those specialist persons that say, okay, they're really good in building out, technology platforms to facilitate this type of innovation. Then let's connect with them. And that's where the collaboration comes in. That's where it becomes absolutely crucial for us to start to collaborate with each other.
Yeah, I'm definitely, I hear you for sure. And definitely, as you know, we at SiliconCaribe are always open to collaborating with you. And I think we're at the stage now where we're going to be doing it a lot more intentionally. We've done it through hackathons and events and us coming to speak and to, at different conferences and judging and everything. But like, I don't think you and I have ever met physically.
No, we've only met virtually. And I was
we're gonna solve that.
In Jamaica.
You were in Jamaica?
I was in Jamaica in March.
This year?
Yeah.
And you didn't reach out to me?
I have to confess, I was only there for 2 days. I came for something with UNESCO and was in and out in 2 days. So
okay. All right.
But we definitely have to rectify that.
We're definitely going to solve that. But I have one more money question before we wrap up.
Okay.
How does 10 Habitat make money? What's the business model? Because you're a nonprofit, but doesn't mean that you're not supposed to make money.
Correct. We just plow all of our profits back into the delivery of our support to entrepreneurs. So our business model is based on paid services and the operating of our co-working space. So we run a co-working space, and since the introduction of the Barbados Welcome Stamp, where we've been attracting quite a lot of remote workers, and now a keen interest from digital nomads, we've started to see a pickup on that, which is also why we invested in the building, because it was part of our sustainability plan. And then outside of that is through a lot of private sector partnerships.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Daniel, I'll give you the last question before we ask him about his prime minister talking about de-risking, and then we're gonna wrap up.
So guys, can I pause you for 2 seconds? Let me just run outside and come back. Sorry.
Okay, we will talk about the news, and then we'll bring it back in.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Cool. All right, guys. So you heard a lot. You heard a lot. I'm so glad that we're doing this island hopping, Danielle. I'm so freaking glad. But yes, and that's what we want to share more stories about what is happening right now with tech community leaders like Selwyn in different Caribbean islands, and see how we can work work together even more to make more Caribbean entrepreneurial success stories. Yeah.
And I think that ultimately, I know that for you and I, that has been our one of our objectives, really, about putting it out there. And this story and Selwyn's whole thesis and what he's been doing really kind of speaks to that. And my final thing when he comes back is like, hey, you're doing a great job and continue the way that you're doing, man.
Absolutely. But we're actually at an hour now, so I kind of want to wrap up, right? But I'm just going to go straight into the news section. So I see where you had the Prime Minister of the Caribbean, Mia Mottley. She's really the Prime Minister of Barbados, people, but we call her that because a lot of us respect her fearless, fulsome leadership across the region. She's not about the status quo. She's about challenging and changing things for the better. She's in her mid to late 50s, and she said, you know what, I got another mandate for another term, so I'm going to swing for the fences. And so the one of the popular videos that's been circulating is about she went to speak to the Financial Services Committee in the U.S. House of Representatives.
Yeah.
And she was flanked by several Caribbean community prime ministers. And she went straight for the jugular when it comes to this whole impact of de-risking the Caribbean that will ensure more financial inclusion and of course, ensure financial access. What was your thoughts when you saw the video of her basically tearing these people another, But go ahead. Yeah.
So I haven't seen the video, I would confess, but I read the story.
Yes.
And ultimately, I think that she's 100% right. And what I would say, because she said, look at the list of countries who you have listed and you will see they're all former colonies and people of color.
Absolutely.
Many countries, in spite of being able to open a bank account in hours, Delaware, Wyoming, within hours in Luxembourg or Zurich, and they remain off this list. And then speak about the risk of money laundering and look and see where the divide comes. And it's absolutely right, that is going for the jugular. But I would say also, it isn't what I've realized, and even, we announced last week when the Queen had passed, I think that what I've realized that just even looking at a lot of ceremonies around the Queen and the colonial state that we are, Barbados still is under the crown. They're looking for independence, etc. But I think that, more importantly, what you see is that we have been blacklisted, and because our leaders and a lot of the leadership around the Caribbean haven't taken decisive action like this before, now we are blacklisted, and a lot of, and we don't know the impact of some of these decisions, even on entrepreneurs and financing, because who wants to come and finance entrepreneurs in the Caribbean when you have all this red tape around, money in the Caribbean? And so, we don't know the unintended consequences of some of this. We say where there's a will, there's a way, but some people don't want to take that higher level of jumping over the fence to be able to get to all of that. So I think that, this is a good step. I wait to see, what is the outcome of it. But I do think that we have to start speaking, which is one of the things I was saying, we are bright in and of ourselves as a region, but sometimes we don't stand up for ourselves, or we hang each other out to dry because, hey, here's what, if I stand up for Ingrid, that'll make Ingrid look good. And then I don't want Ingrid looking better than me. But the fact is as a region, we have to figure out, here's what, when you move to the United States and you live here and stuff like that, you realize everybody says down the islands or the West Indies or the Caribbean. So they see us as being very small islands, and we have to figure out, okay, how do we represent more than the punching weight that we are in terms of how we fly above, especially intellectually? How do we translate that into political power and financial capital?
Yeah, I said all the time, people ask me what's my why. One of the things I always say that, listen, I want to help to change the narrative, that the Caribbean is only a place where you come to get your groove back or your tan on. We're a place of innovation and brilliance and excellence, that is alive and well in technology and business and creativity. So, what is your take on Mayor Motley's pretty much putting on the table that, listen, you guys are practicing financial racism, and with this whole strategy around de-risking and blacklisting what in essence are former colonies, but yet the big guys are allowed to go and footloose and fancy free to do all manner of different things that would raise red flags, should raise red flags, but don't. What's your own take on that? Selwyn, and welcome back.
Yeah, thank you, guys. It's interesting. First of all, I really believe that Mayor Motley is the Prime Minister for our time.
Absolutely,
it's definitely the kind of leadership that's needed now, and the region, I believe, needs now. She's taken the cause of the region and put it on her shoulders to really articulate some of the long-standing challenges that have afflicted the region. So I'm really excited by that. What I will say, is, it's a conversation that is long overdue.
Yes.
What was said needed to have been said. Like Daniel, I agree. It's only to wait and see what happens as a result of this action.
Yeah.
But I read, and if anyone, listening to this wants to really understand this challenge, read the articulation of this de-risking and corresponding banking issue presented by regional economist Marla Dukaran.
That's where I was, yes, absolutely.
She hits it spot on the head, in terms of the selective treatment of the region when it comes to this issue. And yes, one has to question the policy decisions behind this. And so it's something that needed to have been said, and I'm happy that has happened. Now we got to wait and see what the result is.
I don't think not just wait and see. I mean, we need to back her up without question. I mean, you're right. This whole de-risking thing first came to my attention through following Marla Dukaran on Twitter, and she put out her papers, and I went her and I had her on one of for that same Digital Caribbean to talk about how that financial de-risking of the Caribbean, can slow down or set Caribbean entrepreneurs up for failure, how it actually affects entrepreneurship in the region. And she was fantastic. So I'd recommend anybody to go and Google Marla Dukaran. What
I would say as well, as we're talking about the ecosystem, is really bad news for the ecosystem, because when you talk about funding, what this could potentially do is you will start to facilitate an inordinate amount of brain drain from the region and talent where businesses, in order to be funded, have to end up domiciling themselves in other jurisdictions to be able to attract venture funding, and that's never a good thing. It's never a good thing.
That's already happening. That people are using companies like First Base or lawyers to have them registered in Delaware, Florida, Wisconsin, to get funding, or something as basic as to set up their e-commerce capability, payment provider thing. That's been happening for a good 7 years or more.
Hold on. You mean like 20 years, right? Because Ingrid, remember when we didn't have any First Atlantic rates way back when? It's not.
Yeah.
It's been around, and it's that you can almost say it's almost deliberate, because it's like continuing where we've left the plantation but on a different kind of plantation. You know what I mean? Because they controlling things. But I'm going to wrap this up and say, I am pretty optimistic about tech community leaders like yourself, entrepreneurs like yourself, that have taken on the commitment, that care, that continue this whole drive to develop other entrepreneurs and to develop our ecosystem and help to develop the economies of not just where you are domiciled in Barbados, but of course the region. So I am very bullish on people like you, on programs that 10 Habitat does. I'm really, really thankful for your time with us today, Selwyn. I promise you that we'll definitely be working closer together for sure. We have to meet physically. We can't have known about each other and be talking to each other for over 10 years and have never physically been in the same room.
We'll remedy that.
We will remedy that. Any last words, Daniel, as we wrap up here?
Selwyn, thanks for your time. I think that you're doing fantastic work. Continue with the work. Thank you for changing mindsets, because I think that, had you and organizations like yours been around 20 years ago, I think that my entrepreneurial experience would have been much easier. So thank you for the work that you're doing, and continue the excellent work. I agree with 100%. The pre-seed straight up to Series A, I would say, needs a lot of work in the region. I don't know how much even Series A or even seed we're doing, but I would say, that is the missing part in the whole ecosystem. So hats off to you, and whatever way I can help, be sure to reach out. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So this has been this week's episode of This Week in Caribbean Tech. Of course, we're available on YouTube in video and all 8 podcast platforms in audio, from Spotify to Google to Amazon Music to iTunes. Please do subscribe. We're going to be having more interviews like this over the next few weeks for sure, because as always, This Week in Caribbean Tech, even though we challenge people, we ask the hard questions when it comes to the news, we're really at the essence of it all completely bullish on the Caribbean. So until next week, Friday, take it easy. All right.
Thank you so much, guys.
All right.